With the massive success of the Sonic franchise in the early 90s, Sega realized, hey, why aren't we pumping more of these games out? Thus, the 90s and early 2000s became filled to the brim with Sonic content. Games, movies, TV shows, comic books, Sonic was everywhere. And throughout the years, Sonic has only become a bigger franchise. However, a practice that has always remained through the years was releasing 2 or more Sonic games in one day. Some like to call these sets of games dual releases, even though that term kind of doesn't fit well here. You know how Pokemon always releases 2 games at once, which are both pretty much the same game, just with some slight differences? That's a dual release. However, out of every set of Sonic games released on the same day, there's only really one pair that falls under that category. But still, it's interesting how many times throughout the Sonic series' history, multiple games have been released on the same day. Starting on November 23rd, 1993, the day when not 1, not 2, but 3 brand new Sonic games all released for different consoles. Sonic Chaos, Sonic CD, and Sonic Spinball. Man, what a lineup. While all of these games generally had the same mentality of Sonic completing levels, they were all very different in their own right. Sonic Chaos was kind of the budget handheld title, Sonic CD was the main seller of the new Sega CD, and Sonic Spinball existed. Yeah, out of every game released on this day, Sonic Spinball is the worst. However, it was understandably the one that most people played because not everyone owned a Sega CD. Everyone owned a Sega Genesis though. But still, this game kinda sucks. It's very difficult to give this game fair criticism because every time I try to play this game, I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Is it the game's fault or is it my fault? I really can't tell. But I understand why they made this game. Pinball was pretty popular with Sonic, especially with levels like Casino Night appearing in Sonic 2. But making this into a full game wasn't the best decision if you ask me. Sure, it has its fans, but I ain't one of them. The controls, if you can even call them controls, are pretty terrible. And overall, it's just not a very enjoyable Sonic experience. I do like how it took a lot of inspiration from Western media like Sonic Sat AM, but otherwise, as a pinball game, it's pretty harmless. But then we have Sonic Chaos, which is honestly a very underrated game if you ask me. Most of the time, this game gets overshadowed by Sonic Triple Trouble, a similar game that was released on the same console, and for good reason. Triple Trouble is 100% the better game here, but I still think that Chaos has a ton of charm. At the end of the day, this is just a fairly simple 2D Sonic platformer with decent level design, passable controls, and a short runtime. It's just kinda there. When talking about classic Sonic games, 9 times out of 10, Sonic Chaos gets left out of the conversation because, in all seriousness, what does this game do? I mean, it's no surprise that the Game Gear's technical limitations weighed the game down in a few ways, but it's still a pretty fun experience if you ask me. But Sonic CD was the big Sonic game at the time. Despite its wide range of differences from the Genesis games, at the end of the day, this was still a traditional 2D Sonic game, similar to the games that everyone was already familiar with. Because of this, Sonic CD ended up selling more copies than any of the other Sonic games released at the same time. Even with the low sales of the Sega CD, people enjoyed this game, which is kind of shocking because of its general reception nowadays. The game's flaws became more apparent over time, mainly the level design. Yep, we all know about the migraine-inducing level design of this game, and personally, that's the only aspect that's keeping it from being one of the better classic Sonic games in my rankings. But still, the impact of this game should not go unnoticed, as it likely saved the Sega CD from being an even bigger commercial failure. But overall, this was one hell of a holiday season for Sonic fans. We got a handheld platformer, a Genesis spin-off game, and a fully fledged new Sonic game for the brand new Sega CD console. There was something here for everybody, which is why this day will go down as one of the most important days in Sonic's history. Now, there weren't any more dual or triple releases in the Genesis era. Before Sonic Extreme got cancelled, Sonic 3D Blast was supposed to launch alongside it for the Genesis. Yeah, there is a canceled dual release, believe it or not, which, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Sonic 3D Blast being on the Genesis and Saturn has always been weird to me. But anyway, we wouldn't get another major Sonic dual release until November 15th, 2005, which saw the release of Sonic Rush for the DS and Shadow the Hedgehog for all major platforms. Two complete opposites if you ask me. One is a fun, lighthearted, fast-paced 2D platformer, while the other focuses more on exploration and combat and has a much more serious tone. To say the least. Yeah, I see why they did this. They wanted a handheld game to go along with their new console release, just so the handheld people didn't feel left out. On top of that, Shadow 05 wasn't even based on Sonic, so you had to give the consumer something with Sonic playable, and Sonic Rush is a great candidate for the job. Look, I understand the criticism this game gets. I really do. Despite the fun, fast-paced boost gameplay the game features, the level design doesn't really complement it all that well. This was a massive issue in many handheld 2D Sonic games at the time. There was just so much bullshit cool shit shoved into these levels. But despite that, Sonic Rush is still really fucking good, man. I don't know, out of every 2D Sonic game, yes, every 2D Sonic game, including the classics, Rush has always been one of my favorites. Am I a sucker for the boost gameplay? Absolutely. Does nostalgia play a role in my opinion? 100%. But just looking at Rush for what it is, it's just a fun Sonic game. Oh yeah, and Blaze the Cat is in this game too. Yep, S tier. But then we have Shadow the Hedgehog. What do I think of this game? Yeah, D tier. Hey, at least it's better than Sonic Heroes. I can see everything this game was trying to be. It was aiming to be a cool little backstory for Shadow, which also served as a spinoff for the franchise, which also let them make this game dark and edgy. He says damn every 5 seconds, that's so cool. But all jokes aside, that stuff actually got me to want to play this game as a kid. I don't know, I just thought it was cool how this Sonic game had guns and cursing and death. It was everything that my parents actively prevented me from playing. But eventually, when I was like 11 years old, I got the game from eBay, popped it in, played 30 minutes of it, and put it right back down. Yeah, despite everything about the game sounding cool on paper, in execution, Shadow the Hedgehog is ass. The controls are slippery, the levels are mission-based, you have to play the same damn levels 10 times to beat the game, the story is all over the place, and this game is just a mess, plain and simple. But when I play it nowadays, I still find some enjoyment in it. Despite people's tendency to laugh this game off because it has Sonic characters holding guns, and, you know, rightfully so, I still find the guns pretty fun to use. It's the only aspect that makes this game better than Sonic Heroes for me. And you might be asking, well, Riley, why do you hate Sonic Heroes so much? Well, that's for another day, my friend. Anyway, as a dual release, this was weird. Like, really weird. Both are pretty experimental games when you think about it. Rush introduced the boost formula, which is still used in the franchise to this day, and Shadow the Hedgehog probably partially contributed to the quote-unquote dark age of Sonic games. This game was pretty dark after all, and well, pretty bad. But again, I see why these two were released at the same time. They were both made with different audiences in mind, and as we go through the rest of these dual releases, you'll notice that aspect is very common. Anyway, let's jump ahead to November 14th, 2006, which saw the release of Sonic 06 and Sonic 1 GBA. Yikes. I'm also including Sonic Rivals in this because even though it wasn't released on the same day as Sonic 06, it came out like 2 days later. Just let me have this. These games were released to celebrate Sonic's 15th anniversary. What a horrible birthday. On paper, this is cool. They released a full reboot of the Sonic series along with the port of the original game that started it all. That is pretty damn awesome. And then Sonic Rivals comes along and it's just like, okay, cool, racing game. A similar pattern from the Rush and Shadow release remains here. We have one major release for all major platforms, but we also have a handheld release, or in this case, 2 handheld releases. But unfortunately, this tri-release suffers from a whole lot of shit. Let's start with Sonic 06. I probably don't even need to tell you this, but whatever. This game sucked. Whenever this game tried to do something, it just failed. There is not a single aspect about this game that is done perfectly, except for the soundtrack, but, you know, I don't even know where I was going with that, to be honest. The 06 soundtrack is awesome, but gameplay-wise, it suffered from a severe lack of development time. So many ideas were shoved into this game without any time given for them to be fully fleshed out. And I'm not even talking about the glitches and bugs, which is a huge aspect as well, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that even without the glitches, many parts of this game just feel incomplete. The story has tons of plot holes, the level design is great at times, but bad at other times. 06 just has a lack of consistency, which wouldn't really be a problem if a lot of it wasn't bad. Now, Sonic 1 GBA, how did they f this up? You already have the Sonic Advance games, which are more, advanced, I guess, than the first damn Sonic game. How is a port of the first Sonic game so much worse than the advanced games? For some odd reason, this version of the game is not optimized. First, the screen crunch issues. This was an issue in a lot of the Game Gear Sonic platformers, but somehow, it's even more of a problem here. Why is the screen so zoomed in? Is there a reason for this? I understand wanting the sprites to show up well, but god damn, I can't see anything that's coming. There are also several weird graphical issues. Many points have slowdown and other frame rate issues, which isn't a lot of fun when you're trying to go fast. There were some additions in this version of the game, like the option to use a spin dash and save files, but otherwise, this version of the game is inferior in every way. I think this was haphazardly put together to be released alongside Sonic 06, because I find it very hard to believe that they wanted to release the game in the state it was in. Also, why was this released on the GBA and not the DS? I know that the DS reads GBA cartridges, but still, it's kind of weird. And then we have Sonic Rivals. It's a pretty harmless racing game. I was never a big fan of this title. I don't know, man, the game controls fine enough, but it's just kinda boring if you ask me. I wish we saw more Sonic games besides the Sonic Rivals games show up on the PSP, but sure, spin-off games will do the trick. Silver also shows up here, which is a cool way of tying it into Sonic 06, but yeah, this is a fine racing game, and it makes sense to release something like this alongside other Sonic games. But unfortunately, this triple release is very lacking. The only semi-decent game here is Sonic Rivals, and that didn't even come out on the same day as the others. I have no idea why this 15th anniversary celebration was so lackluster. I feel like they had all of the right tools to make these games good, but instead we have shitty games, rushed ports, and mediocre racing games. But thankfully, the Sonic series is in a much better spot now. For our last stop, we're heading to November 11th, 2014, which saw the launch of the Sonic Boom franchise. Oh boy, here we go again! I have no idea why most of the games in this video are bad, but oh well, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric and Shattered Crystal are no exception to this. Honestly though, out of every dual release in this video, this one is the only true dual release in the sense that it's like Pokemon. Both of these games are very different, but you can connect both of them to get some extra stuff. Not to mention the fact that these were both advertised as one of the same, but no, that's not the case whatsoever. Let's start with the Wii U game, Rise of Lyric. I've already talked about this game a few times in previous videos, but I'll say it again. While this game is pretty bad, I still find a hint of enjoyment in playing it. I don't know why. When looking at this game from an unbiased standpoint, the only thing that this game does right is the level environments. These worlds look really good if you ask me, but unfortunately, the visuals were held back due to the Wii U's hardware. But that's about it. The level design is slow, the combat is boring, the characters control like a damn rock, and there are bugs and performance issues everywhere. I know this game had a troubled development, but still, this is bad, like really bad. But at the end of the day, I still find it kind of fun at times. I don't know why. But while Rise of Lyric was the main big 3D title, Shattered Crystal is a toned down 2D platformer for the 3DS. Oh, but don't get too excited, this game still has a ton of issues. The level design is very expansive and encourages exploration. The problem with this is that these levels drag on for so damn long. If you're going to make a Sonic Metroidvania, then make an actual Metroidvania. So many ideas just conflict here. The controls and gameplay are fine enough, albeit a little slow at times, but it is enjoyable to a certain extent. But the game is just held down by the level design, and that's it. Thankfully, this game did get a sequel a couple of years later that did improve the level design, and it's a very good game. But Shattered Crystal, while being fun at times, is very underwhelming. Regardless, these two games, without a doubt, contributed to the failure of the Sonic Boom franchise. Sure, they also had a pretty good TV show, comics, merchandise, and all that good stuff, but when it comes to the actual video games released, they suck. Even though I find Rise of Lyric to be sort of a guilty pleasure, it's still a bad game at its core. And while Shattered Crystal does a lot of things right, the main philosophy of the level design weighs the game down a ton. These games are not good, and as a dual release, it's even worse. I do feel like the Sonic Boom series could have been way better if they just released Fire and Ice and forgot about the other two. Hell, if that were the case, the Sonic Boom series would probably still be going to this day. But unfortunately, all we have is a bunch of missed potential. Anyway, those were all of the Sonic dual and triple releases. While some of these sets are pretty good, a lot of them kind of fell flat. It's now more clear than ever that it's not a good idea to release multiple games at once, because at least one of them is doomed to fail. But let me know what you all think about these games in the comments down below. But thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.